And we shall kick off another little podcast chat. Good morning, everybody. Welcome back. Today, I am super happy. I've been chasing this guy for a little while, and today I finally managed to get him. So welcome, Dave, to my podcast, Move, Breathe, Live.
Hi, Wibbs. It's great to meet you, finally.
Finally, indeed.
Yes.
So Dave, before we get started, perhaps you can just tell people who you are and why I might be chatting to you today, and then we'll kind of dive into some bits from there.
Sure. So I set up Bamboo Clothing, June 2006. It was like a long time ago now. I had a mission I was so disillusioned in my mid-30s with how business worked. I wanted to set up a business that was environmentally kind and better, and I wanted to have a business that showed bigger businesses how you can have success doing things the right way, and in fact that it's more likely by doing it in a good way that looks after everybody and the environment, and just does it in a human way. I wanted to make a point because I looked around in my previous business at how business generally worked, and I just thought, this is not it. This is not how it's supposed to be. There's a better way than this. And so I wanted to make a point, which is quite funny, really, because I had absolutely no idea what I was doing. I had complete confidence, but no idea. It was hilarious.
I mean, to be fair, that is how I've got through 38 years of my life, is no idea, but all the confidence. So, so cool.
I think they call it manifesting these days.
Yeah, I think so. Just be like cocksure and just go at it and just fake it till you make it. So for those of you who I'm pretty sure everyone who's listening to this has an idea. Like, I am fortunate enough to be one of the ambassadors for Bamboo Clothing. I have been teaching yoga with them since the beginning of the first lockdown, when everything went a bit crazy and we moved online, and we were doing online classes, free classes on Instagram for everyone. And everyone knows I basically spend my entire life just in bamboo clothing, mostly just in bamboo pants on Instagram. And, you know, pretty much everyone I know who has ever ended up buying anything bamboo has just been like, just stuck with it and love it. So going into all of this, I want to come into how you came across bamboo, I guess, in a little while, but you mentioned your previous business. Obviously, it sounds like you're a bit of a kind of entrepreneurial type guy. What were you doing before bamboo, which kind of made you see, if you like, the ills of business and how actually you wanted to go in the other direction?
So I had a business from the age of about 25 to 35. I had a business called TSF, which is still running, and it's a promotional clothing company, promotional and corporate clothing company. Because essentially, I started printing T-shirts when I was at university to make money to go off traveling.
Screen prints?
Screen printing, yeah. I didn't actually do it, but I organized it. The very first one was just printing up summer '88, printing up T-shirts to sell around campus at Loughborough, and it's hilarious. I found out where I could get T-shirts up in Nottingham, and I found out I could get them printed down in Leicester. So and I had a little moped, so I had this massive big box of T-shirts, and I was reaching over to the handlebars, coming down from Nottingham down the A6 to Leicester, dropped them off and got them printed, and then sold them around campus, and that was the first thing. And then I started doing halls of residence and clubs and what have you. Anyway, that helped pay for my travel. I went off traveling for about 3 years after I finished at Loughborough, and then when I came back from traveling and messed around a bit, and I wanted to find a business that, because I used to do a lot of pole vaulting, but I wasn't good enough to get paid. So, so I set up a promotional and corporate clothing company, which would essentially give me the time on the side and the flexibility to go off pole vaulting, which and training for that, which I did pretty much every day. And I did that for 10 years, and that's where that's what I saw. I had a window on how the business world operates, and I didn't really like it. I didn't like how it seemed to be acceptable to treat people in a certain way, and to treat, especially bigger companies, treating smaller companies. Classic example is payment terms, paying at 90 days. I just thought, this is a disgrace, and this is not how it's supposed to be. And lots of other examples as well. And so after I stopped pole vaulting, within about a year, I very quickly realized that it was a really, really crummy, rubbishy business that I'd created. And it's perfect for a one-person business. The way I had set it up, it wasn't very good. We were lurching from month to month. So anyway, I sold that to Mark, who worked with me, and another pole vaulter. And he's been running it, and he's made a great success of it, just as a one-person business. It's brilliant. It's a lovely one-person business, and he's done very well and continues to do so. So I kind of walked away from TSF. I walked away actually because I got the offer to do a trip across Greenland with a team of Gurkhas. I somehow blagged the job of a cameraman on an expedition to cross Greenland with these Gurkhas. So we man-hauled our way across Greenland. An amazing experience, big learning curve for me in every respect. Just an amazing, and that's when I had a little bit of an epiphany in terms of what I wanted to do. And it was such a beautiful environment, just snow and ice, pretty much. But it was so beautiful, and I just thought, I've always had an interest in what the future holds for the planet, and obviously there's a degree of concern thrown into that. And so I thought, well, okay, that was a bit of a directional epiphany for me, and so when I came back, I spent 6 months editing this film, because I was didn't know what you were doing. I didn't know what I was doing, so it took so long. But that all worked out nicely in the end. And so I was looking around, and I was actually scratching around. It was a bit of a low point, if I'm really honest, in my life, because I was pretty broke, and I had no obvious skills, no direction, had no idea. And I was 37. I was thinking, my God, how did you let this happen? You're 37 now. You should be further down the line than potless, jobless, clueless. It wasn't a good position. And I was doing but I knew how to make clothes. My previous business, I'd learned how to make clothes.
Right.
And specifically in Syria, actually.
Right.
It was just the way that the cookie had crumbled. I'd built very good relationships with the lovely, lovely people in Aleppo in Syria. But I was doing some production work. I was making some baby wear for a friend of mine in China as a favor, because I wasn't doing anything, and I was sort of scratching around, looking around, thinking, what am I going to do? And when I was in China, I came across the idea for bamboo clothing.
That's what I was going to wonder.
Doing it.
I wonder how that kind of came across. Like, where was it that, now it seems like bamboo clothing is like an obvious thing. Like, so many people are now kind of seem to be venturing into having bamboo as a material. But
in 2004, I can tell you, nobody was doing it. There was one guy in California,
right,
that was doing it, and there's hardly anybody doing it in China,
right,
and there was certainly no one in Europe. So I looked at it and I thought, this is really interesting. This has got some really interesting properties, and everything seemed to fit. And I looked at the environmental side, and it wasn't perfect, but it was like 95% better
Yeah, I was
And
wondering that because at the time of that, was there obviously turning the bamboo into the kind of more, what I'm wearing here, which is like the comfiest top in the world. You obviously got to somehow kind of break down I guess like the silicon or whatever's in it, like the cellulose, sorry. And so I guess at the time that was, because I know, which we'll come on to in a little bit, but you've done so much work on the environmental side around that. But traditionally that was kind of quite a bit of chemicals, I guess, to break down the cellulose. And that was, I guess, not really reused or just kind of dumped or whatever else.
Traditionally, making viscose from anything, whether it's bamboo or anything else, is not a brilliant part of the process. So we spent years and years on this, working on. I mean, it's difficult to be the prime movers of a revolution from the inside when you are a tiny in terms of your relationship to a viscose mill, which is quite a big affair. We were a tiny little dot in terms of our influence. What we can do, we can go around and find the most forward-looking, forward-thinking places to work with, which is what we've done. And there's one place, particularly in China, who are leading the world in changing things. And as we've got bigger and we pointed other people in the dark, I like to think we have, with the closed loop water system and the way that they approach it, and they get it, I think, and so we pointed other people in that same direction. But when you look at, and so that's come forward in leaps and bounds with our association with ZDHC, zero discharge of hazardous. I always say waste. I always forget the last one. Anyway, it's an organisation that we work with, and we're doing really good things there, and actually things evolve, and that has evolved, and it's in the context of everything else. And when you look at everything else with bamboo, you have to look at it in the round. It's that 5%, and it really is, 5%. That there's so much else that is fantastic and amazing and so beneficial, and I mean, I won't bang on about it all, but
I mean, feel free to bang on about it. Like, I mean, just what you were mentioning then. So you kind of mentioned like the closed loop water system type thing. So just in case people are kind of wondering what that might mean, like, I mean, I've had a little, if anyone's interested, like on the Bamboo website, there's a whole like environmental section you can go and look at, and you can see near enough like step by step what happens with the bamboo and the clothing and whatever. It's really, really cool. But so what do you mean by like the closed loop system?
Essentially, the water used in the process goes round and round, and it doesn't go anywhere else, get dumped, or it's a very, very professional process that has doing the right thing environmentally at its core thinking. Nice. But in terms of the overall process, I mean, every clothing company has various footprints. It has a water footprint, it has a carbon footprint, it has a chemical footprint, it has a land use footprint. And so what we've done is break down those footprints and measure them, and really measure them in a very honest way. For example, and try and reduce those to as close to zero as possible, and then have a process where we kind of rebalance or offset, if you like, what is left. So taking carbon as an obvious example, it turns out, so if you say, oh yeah, we're and this is where the greenwashing comes in, yeah, we're carbon neutral, look at us. And actually, when you break it down, it turns out that, because we had broken it down, it turns out that what most people are talking about is their operation in the UK, or their shipping from wherever it is, from Turkey for example, or the Far East, and their UK operation, and the electricity their offices use in the UK, and all of that, and that's not really carbon neutral, because it turns out that's only 20% of the whole thing. But 40% is, if you're talking about having a carbon neutral piece of clothing, you've got to go from, in this case, growing in the field, all the way through that process, until it's then shipped. And that's 40% of the carbon footprint. The 20% is the shipping and the UK operation and all of that stuff. And then the other 40% is once it is after it arrives on the doorstep of the customer. So we allow for 50 washes. And we hope there's a lot more than 50 washes, but we allow for 50 washes. And that's the other 40%. And we work that out based on not tumble drying, don't tumble dry, just hang it up, and 30 degrees in the washing machine, because, and it's worth noting. So in the lifetime of a garment, 40% of the carbon footprint is in the washing machine. After it gets delivered. So by washing at 30 degrees, that makes a big difference. That helps, and not tumble drying. That helps.
But also, I think there's
still 40% of the carbon footprint of that garment from growing in the field to end of life, and that's also such a proper carbon footprint.
Well, I've kind of read a book by Rob Wolf and Diana Rogers, who they're kind of nutritionist and health and fitness type people, but they kind of have done the same idea with like beef and the whole life cycle compared to just the farming side of thing. And it's exactly the same. There's companies who will kind of say, oh well, it's this tiny amount here, we're carbon neutral, but then when you look at the whole thing, it's a very different picture. But one of
it's a nightmare. It's a minefield, because it's so easy. It's so easy to virtue signal.
Absolutely.
And a picture, and it's largely nonsense.
But one of the things I really like about what BAM has been doing, and obviously me and Jen have been involved in it as well, is that basically wear more, wash less kind of campaigns we've been doing. Because I remember I used to live with my grandparents, and Joan wouldn't let me do my own washing, obviously. I was in my 20s, but she had to do my washing for me. But she would basically just refuse to wash my jeans, because I'd be like, well, I've just been out and there's some mud on them type thing. And I'd put them in the wash, and she'd be like, stop washing your jeans. Like, they don't need to be washed. Just give them a wipe and they'll be right, And it's kind of what, even from back then, I was like, oh yeah, actually, you've got a bit of mud on. Just that they're not smelly. They're not, they're not filthy. They're not sweaty. You don't need to wash them anyway. And there is this thing I feel these days where it's kind of like, just you wear a t-shirt once and you don't want to be seen in it again 2 days on the trot, so you stick it in the wash type thing. And it's kind of outrageous when you think, as you say, if 40% of the carbon footprint of an item of clothing comes from when you buy it to when it's like dead. Like,
yeah, I've never been I've never been troubled by the wear it once and stick it in the washing machine syndrome. That's never been part of my picture. And actually, there's was it your grandmother refused to wash?
Yeah.
I think there's a connection that certainly our grandparents' generation, if not our parents, they got it. They got that connection with resource and how you live your life. And I think one of the big challenges that we've got is that we've lost that connection with the real, with the natural world, in terms of where we get our food from and all the rest of it. We've lost that connection. And I believe that our future lies in reestablishing that connection. I'm with my spare time that I now have, because now Ryan Shannon is MD at BAM. He's far better than I ever was, and I'm not joking. I'm good for ideas and etc. etc. And I sit behind Ryan and support him. but that does leave a bit of free time, and I've been getting into the notion of regenerative agriculture.
Yes. Yeah.
And into the filming of a film called 6 Inches of Soil, which is going to be coming out next year.
Oh, amazing.
And all about the importance of the soil, actually, and the biodiversity around the soil, and actually and that connection that we have with the land, essentially, with where we get our food from, which is pretty fundamental. And will become more and more profoundly fundamental in the decades ahead.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's essentially that book I mentioned, The Sacred Cow. I mean, that's exactly what, you know, regenerative agriculture is at its center. And actually, when you look at the importance of, for everything from, like, you know, human health through to, you know, world health and the environment as a general, realistically, you know, being able to shift to a far more regenerative agricultural picture is really the only way to go. I mean, you know, traditional farming and whether it be monocrop or animals, you know, there's just such a limited lifestyle. I mean, I think we're better in the UK than in many countries as far as like the regenerative agriculture. You know, it's more, you know, it's certainly animal side of things. It's kind of less feed farms and whatever else. But yeah, it's such a, I don't know, and it kind of makes sense with where you come from with the bamboo picture of like everything regenerative, everything as kind of closed loop as possible, which is really the great thing about regenerative agriculture, is just how much more closed loop everything ends up being.
Well, we've been going down the wrong road for the last 70 years.
Yeah.
In terms of our chemical usage. I mean, it was great initially because, you know, fertilizers suddenly, you know, increased yields massively, and, you know, wow, fantastic. But we've been slowly killing our environment, and the end game from that is a complete collapse. And that's obviously, you know, as bad as it sounds. So that is changing, and the wildlife trusts in the UK actually are doing a great work with this to reverse that direction of travel, and we can reverse that direction of travel. But it's I think there's an awareness of what's needed, and once again, funnily enough, it seems to be that the psychotic big business mentality is getting in the way of what needs to be done. And so I've kind of become quite revolutionary in my thinking, because I think, well, look, it's up to us, the people. The government doesn't do a brilliant job, but it's being led by the nose in a lot of the time by completely psychopathic, money now, profit-driven enterprise that has a very, very powerful lobby in almost every industry. And you know, we the people need to wake up to that and get involved and start impacting our own results. And that's what I'm doing with the spare time outside of BAM, with looking at new models, new financial models. I mean, I've got nothing to teach farmers in terms of how to farm, but I think there are some interesting new financial models that I would like to play with and make a film about and communicate.
Have you I don't know if you've come across it or not, down at se2ep6 farm in Sussex, Isabel, that's it, she did that book, Wilding, I think it was. That book to me was just I mean, I was already kind of, you know, learning about regenerative agriculture and the like, but that book was a proper, like, mind-blowing, like, if you let nature, like, look after itself, like, nature will look after itself. I mean,
that's the great thing. I mean, you can give it a bit of a kickstart.
Oh, definitely.
Ultimately, if all we need to do is
get out of the way.
Get out the way, and nature doesn't need much help. when you've got your foot on its neck the entire time, you'll eventually strangle it. But I think, I mean, the rewilding project at NEP is really interesting. It's about 2,500 acres. I recognise that whilst rewilding is great, brilliant, fantastic, we actually need to make the land productive as a whole.
Absolutely, yes. Yeah,
we need to eat. And whilst I've kind of stopped eating meat 98% of the time, you need animals as well. The part of the process of the ecosystem is to have a very light footprint of animals, because they poo and they scratch around, and that is an essential part of the system.
Yeah.
But yeah, it turns out that if we stopped eating quite so much meat, we would have an enormous amount of land available, because so much of the land is used to grow feed for animals, which we then eat. And yeah, we have so much land available if we went to a mainly plant-based diet. And so that needs to be productive land, but it can be done without chemicals.
Monocropping, yeah,
working with nature, permaculture. There's a whole topic of conversation there, but the takeaway message is things have got to change, and things very slowly are beginning to change once we can get the psychopathic multinational corporations out of the way. Yeah, which is obviously not easy.
Not easy, especially, as you say, when they've had such a well, then they've got all the money and they've kind of got all of the influence in government and power and whatever else. It's pretty tricky. Yeah. Well, from there, I kind of feel like we should we'll move away from the big kind of heavy stuff. And you've kind of mentioned about your love of pole vaulting, but from pole vaulting as well, like just general health and wellness. And obviously we've chatted before we pressed record. We chatted briefly on the phone the other day about your, as you say, you've just been and hiked, or you hiked across bloody Greenland, and outdoors living, exercise, life is a big part of your life. And as I say, this is move, breathe, live. We like to move and breathe and try and like figure out how people can live happier and whatever else. So how has that kind of influenced your life as well, as into, yes, what you do with bamboo, because we already know that's kind of a little bit that side of things, but we've just chatted about regenerative agriculture, regenerative living, but then that kind of comes with regenerative self as well, looking after ourselves.
Well, I mean, exercise and trying to live well has been a constant all my life, I suppose.
Yeah.
I love, I had a love affair with pole vaulting from the age of 17 to 32, which I then rekindled bizarrely from the age of 45 until the first lockdown. I somehow never imagined I would, fell into pole vaulting again. But I think what I like about pole vaulting, apart from the fact that I just love the process of pole vaulting. It's such a beautiful.
I mean, I can't even get my head around doing a pole vault, because I watch it and it just looks ridiculous. Like,
well, if you go to YouTube and do a slow motion film of someone pole vaulting, very high, and it is beautiful.
Oh, absolutely.
And so
I can't get my head around how someone came up with that as a sport of like, I know, see that wall over there? I'm going over that with this big old pole.
I know. So, but thank God they did. So I love it for its own sake, but especially in my 40s and now my 50s, It's a great way. I think, you know, those times when you know that you should be going out and doing something physical, but you just can't be bothered.
Yeah.
And we've all had that.
Definitely.
If you've got some reason that you need to, or some focus, then that is the reason. And you know, in the intervening years, before I got caught up with pole vaulting again, I replaced, you know, the need to go out, the reason to go out and do something. You know, I did a few, you know, all these challenges you can do, and you know, the 100K trail walker or this or that, or whatever. You know, I did a bunch of those because I think it's good to have something coming up that either slightly scares you, or that you need to focus on to prepare for, a reason to go out and do something when you don't really want to. Because I'm capable of spectacular laziness, as well as you know, being very, very driven and focused. I can go down either route very happily.
I think that's definitely a human trait of, like, I mean, I think evolutionarily we're definitely not made to want to be doing everything all the time, but I think, as you say, when you've got it, you can use it, and when you can't, having something that you have to do it for, rather than, even if you don't want to, just a goal, a purpose, a plan. It's like, fuck, I don't. Okay, I know I've got 3 weeks. I've got to do that marathon. Like,
well, you know what? And the weird thing is, the funny thing is, the second you're actually out the door, or you're up and running, it's brilliant.
Yeah,
it's pure inertia, and so having a reason to break that 2 minutes of inertia where you just quickly throw something on and get out the door.
Is such a hard job.
Yeah. That's why I quite like Pilates. I do Pilates online Zoom with a fantastic instructor, and I quite like the class element, where you just have to get yourself there at a certain time. There's no motivation required. All you got to do is get yourself there, and the rest will happen, which is how it used to be with pole vaulting in the old days. I used to train in a gang of about 5-6 of us, and all you got to do is get yourself there, and the momentum that group and the motivation that group has, well, you'll be part of it. Actually, you'll be excited to get there, because it was like, come on. I think movement and balance in life. I think, you know, I mean, I was very happy to work quite long hours for you know, a fair while with BAM. I was very happy to do it. If I wasn't happy to do it, I wouldn't have done it, I don't think. So I think you've got to work with what you've got, I suppose. And I think, in terms of having a happy, balanced life, it's a funny one, isn't it? Because you do have to put yourself out the comfort zone. That's all part of growing, and that's all part of evolving as a human being, because you learn lessons. That's really, and in some ways, that's what life is all about, for you to learn lessons, and however esoteric you want to go with that, you know, in terms of your soul and all the rest of it. But so you need to put yourself out of the comfort zone, but you don't want to end up in a position where you're doing something that you weren't built to do somehow,
or even that you just totally end up doing. Do you know what I mean? So it's all very well kind of pushing yourself to do something, but if you end up absolutely despising it and just doing it because, you know, someone said that you need to be uncomfortable, like, again, that's not really balanced, is it?
User discretion required. You have to be honest with you. You have to be grown up, be honest with yourself, and never settle for something that's a bit shit. Always inquire. I think this is a real key thing. If you're always inquiring and always thinking about what's the best thing, especially when it's nice to have a direction,
Yeah.
But be honest with yourself about what it is that floats your boat. And it's not an easy process. I mean, I had absolutely no idea what I wanted to do when I was, well, at any point really, until I actually started the first business I had. And then, you know, I some people are very lucky. They go up thinking, well, I want to be a doctor or whatever, or a pilot or whatever it is.
But I also feel on that count though, it's one of those things of if you have so I've never known what I want to do at all. Like I've literally fallen from one thing to the next. But that's kind of in some ways made it life slightly easier, because it's, if you don't really know why you're doing something or what, and you can enjoy it for the time you do it, and then when it gets to the stage where you kind of become disillusioned with it, you kind of go, oh, I'm going to move on. Whereas I kind of feel if you've like had your entire life planned around being something, a doctor, a nurse, a pilot, whatever, and then you become disillusioned with it and it all kind of begins to, you know, not be what you thought and whatever else, you've kind of had such a large chunk of your life like aimed and tied into that thing that actually letting it go can then be more of a challenge perhaps. Whereas I've never really had that problem, because I've been like, I never really meant to be a nurse. I just did it because it was something at the time. And then I've kind of gone from that and I've become a yoga teacher. And then I've gone from that and I've done my breath work and my movement therapy. And, you know, and I kind of chop and change around from here to there. And then I've gone back to nursing a little bit at the moment. And, you know, my flights of fancy are slightly easier to perhaps go with. But again, if you don't know what you're doing, there's many people I know who, if they don't know what you're doing or what you want to do, then it can be you can feel super lost.
Yeah, and you know, I have to be honest with myself here and say the period before I started BAM was not a good place to be. Because I was a little bit lost, I think, for you know, probably about a year. I was thinking, God, what am I going to do? And I was really low on money, and so when I came across the idea of BAM, I was so highly motivated, to get myself out of this hole, financially, mentally, emotionally, directionally, that the motivation was so high. And it turns out I had learned a few things along the way that would help me with BAM. I mean, I wouldn't wish that period of time on anybody.
No.
And also the 18 months before and after setting up BAM, June 2006, I wouldn't wish that on anybody. But actually, that's when it all happened in terms of getting this thing off the ground. And it's been progressively easier ever since. I mean, that was, you know, I'm kind of proud that I got through that. And not for 1 second did I think that it would fail. Although I had absolutely nothing to back that up. And so there was suffering there, and there was application, and there was motivation that came from
harder, darker time,
self-recrimination a little bit, because I think, you know, get yourself out, roll your sleeves up, you know, dig yourself out of this now, Dave. And you've got the possibility to do this. You've got a direction now, and it was actually much better having a direction. Because I wasn't a bit, and it's like, well, okay, come on, crack on now, make this work. And so there was no bear in mind, I've just come from a trip across Greenland where you know, we're trekking for 8-10 hours a day. You know, I lost 2 stone over a month. You know, I almost lost my fingers. I was in great pain and discomfort for an awful lot of that trip. And so having come from that, you kind of think, well, I can do anything.
And I kind of feel like perhaps that's something which almost a little bit like we were saying before with like my grandparents' generation, or, you know, whatever else, is like that, almost like that little bit of grit of roll your sleeves up and crack on type thing. Like, you know, going through rationing and whatever else, and, you know, how that maybe affected people's views on the environment. They probably weren't even thinking necessarily environment. They were probably purely thinking like my wallet. But at the same time, it's kind of that hardship there kind of gives you way more. I can crack on and just get on with my life, which you trekking for a month and nearly losing your fingers kind of gives you this idea of like, Jesus, I just did that. I could go and set up a business and like make some clothes out of bamboo.
Yeah, there's a kind of invincibility that comes with experience of doing well under pressure, I suppose.
Yeah.
So it's a difficult one in terms of achieving the balance in life. Sometimes there isn't a balance actually. And you can and finding what it is that it's best for you to do. Sometimes you've got to go through difficulty, and I think don't shy away from difficulty, because it's only on the other side you can say, well, actually maybe this isn't the best direction for me. But if I'd had any hint of that in the picture at the start of BAM, then BAM wouldn't exist.
Yeah, absolutely.
So,
I think
let's not throw the baby out with the bathwater.
No, absolutely.
It's self-honesty, self-reflection, and philosophical thought, I guess, and then action.
I think Jordan Peterson says something along those similar lines of like, he just says, just aim at something, like just have an aim at something, because even if like it's kind of in the wrong direction, actually you've moved, and once you've started moving, then you can recalibrate and go. Whereas if you're just stuck in inertia, you're just stuck in like a stagnant place, and it can be really hard. But I think we briefly talked when we were on the phone before about my breath work I do and whatever else, and a big chunk of the work I do with my breath work is, and even to a certain degree, we kind of mentioned it with the yoga earlier as well, but like trying to put people into discomfort and realizing their ability to move through it still. And that's one of for me, the thing I love about breath work is you can make someone feel almost like they're going to have a panic attack through breath holds, through breathing exercises. But if it's done in a controlled, correct manner, you can actually give them an entire experience of like, this feels like torture and like hell, but actually I've actually picked up these, I'm learning these tools which allow me to relax through or relax into it, breathe in, or like lean into it, and actually I feel like I'm stronger coming out the other side. And for me, that's kind of I think having a challenge, having a something to bump up against is actually so important. And one of the biggest things I find with so many people who do come to see me with anxiety and whatever else is actually not necessarily having a solid wall to bump up against and actually learn from. And I kind of feel like we are very, very comfortable these days in our life. Do you know what I mean? Like, life is pretty cozy. But actually being able to kind of force yourself, which is why people love getting in ice baths and saunas and all that stuff these days, because it is just a mental challenge to step you outside of your kind of cozy fireplace.
Well, we're not born for comfort.
No.
And it doesn't do us any favors. Sadly, in a way.
It would be so lovely if it did.
But we're built for challenges and uncertainty and sometimes discomfort, and that is so good for the soul. It's so good for the soul. And so I've seen it from both sides, and you need both sides. You need that time chilling out on the sofa doing not much, and you need the other thing, and you need the other thing on a regular basis. It's good for the soul. It just requires a bit of discipline. I'm talking about exercise now, I guess.
So outside of on the exercise thing, you meant outside of the pole vaulting, you've previously also mentioned to me that you're pretty big into kite surfing, I think it was.
Well, so when the lockdowns happened, March 2020, so how do I explain this? So I wasn't able to pole vault.
Yeah.
Other things were happening in my life that pole vaulting took a back seat, and so I haven't actually pole vaulted for 2 years now. I want to have a competition coming up in the summer, and I want to. I've kept my legs in really good nick, less so upper body, and I need to work on that for the summer, because I want to. There's a competition I want to do in the summer. But so yeah, because the pole vaulting facility at Sutton was closed, and that was that. But I've got a bunch of friends who are really into kite surfing, and I got into kite surfing in the summer of 2020. So I'm beyond beginner now, but I'm certainly not. Yeah. But it's it's not about not
at all.
The winner is the one with the biggest smile.
That's a great quote. I like that.
As they say. So but it's brilliant, absolutely brilliant. Whizzing around using nature with a bunch of really good friends is as good as it gets. It doesn't get any better.
And being out in the sea as well there's something primordial, something kind of just I don't know. There's some connection with the sea. Certainly, I find I spent my life growing up sailing dinghies like on the sea and on rivers and stuff. And for me, there's just something about being in the ocean, being in the that power is unreal.
Well, funnily enough, I've always had a slight fear of the sea.
Okay.
Especially of drowning. I almost drowned a couple of times, and I think that you do have that does develop a healthy respect for the sea. And I did one of those times was in doing a lot of kayaking. So I went through a kayaking phase for about 18 months and did quite a lot of kayaking, but I've never really embraced the sea as because I've always been slightly fearful. Being really honest. So, but with kite surfing, it's great because you're wearing a wetsuit and you're wearing an impact vest. It's you cannot sink. And so I like to think it looks pretty out there when you're watching it, but I like to think I'm covering the angles, and actually I'm really getting comfortable now with the idea of being in the sea. And if I went out 2 kilometers and the wind drops and I was just floating around, doesn't bother me actually.
But again, coming back to that idea of challenges and whatever else, it's the same thing. Like being able to slowly adapt to something that you're fearful of actually will rather than go in some direction, just pick a direction and go with it. If you were just like, I'm fearful of the sea, I'm not going to do that, you would never ever get to the stage where you could say, I got 2 kilometers out and the wind dropped and I was just plodding around for an hour. Like you would never reach that stage.
If you dress for the swim, as they say in kite surfing, so you dress for 3 hours, 4 hours in the water. So you've got the kit, the wetsuit, and you've got the harness. You're not going to sink. Nothing bad can happen.
No.
So eventually you will get back to the shore, because you only kite surf with an onshore wind. So what wind there is pushing you
back, right?
Eventually. I was kite surfing with a German pal of mine, and he went out. I was sat on the beach watching him, and he just went out and he kept going and going and going and going. Eventually he disappeared, and then a while later his kite disappeared. He was over the horizon. He was 10 miles. He was a long way out. And eventually came back. And I said, Manny, what if the wind had dropped? You'd have a 4-hour swim. And he said, actually it's 5 hours. I did it already. He'd done exactly that 2 weeks before. He'd had a 5-hour swim.
I'm sure he had a lovely time. He must have done it because he did it again.
it wasn't fussed because you're not gonna. It was in warm weather, to be fair. But if you're not going to sink, and you've got the right kit on, then.
And it's just some time to yourself quite often, isn't it? Like that kind of time away from technology.
He saw it as meditation. He actually just went in a straight line for half an hour meditating, and then the same coming back.
Yeah, amazing.
So, yeah. No, it's fantastic sport, kite surfing. So I got into that, but I don't want to forget about pole vaulting. And I think it's good to have, stuff
different. Yeah, absolutely. As you say, between like Pilates, pole vaulting, and wind and kite surfing, you've got a fairly good mix of things going on.
Yeah, and I think I'm a big fan of movement. Which probably music to your ears.
Yeah, absolutely.
Body movement. It's so fundamentally important, especially when you're the other side of 40. It's so fundamentally important. I've been planning on writing a book called Health and Fitness in the Over 40s. Mm-hmm. I've been planning it for about 15 years. I've just never got the time, and I'm running out of excuses. I've written out the chapters about a year ago, and then got no further. I fell into other stuff. So
kite surfing.
eventually, I'll get around to that. But I do have a real interest in that, and how to keep your body, your mind and body in good nick.
Yeah, absolutely.
Over the decades, because there's the idea of just accepting decline. I mean, it's inevitable eventually, of course, but we're capable of so much more than we ask ourselves. I think, and maintaining a balance and yeah, there's probably a few principles. I always ask, what is it best if I want to be a really sprightly kite surfing 80-year-old?
Yeah.
What do I do now? That's essentially, absolutely. Or if I want to be active when I'm older. What do I do now? And that's that's a big question, because exercise, very, very good. You don't want to overdo it.
No, I think that's such a big. I think actually that's one of the most misunderstood things is people get told that they need to exercise and they just think they need to do it every day. And actually, movement, from my view, movement is more important than exercise. And actually moving plenty and then having some exercise 3 days a week on top is the key to a longer.
That makes a lot of sense. Because you can't exercise. Well, you could, and you can break it up, but I don't. So I haven't tested that hypothesis lately. I'm sure you can, but the rules of the game change as you get older. Mm-hmm. And what applies in your 20s
definitely
doesn't apply. The whole train really hard, then recover, and then go again. It's more subtle than that. And I learned this from Brian Hooper, my pole vault coach, and who's got such a wealth of knowledge. He's late 60s now. Mm-hmm. He was world superstars champion. You probably not old enough to remember superstars, but it was a big deal. It was a big deal. It was sports stars across the board, all competing against each other in different sports challenges and tests. And Brian was never was defeated. He was the world champion 3 times, and he really understands the body and exercise. And he said he had a chastening experience around about 40 when he started pole vaulting again, because the rules change on you, and you have to, instead of having massive sessions, it's more restrained than that, which in some ways is quite nice. I mean, there's nothing quite like really going for it in a session, but I never do that now. I never really push the breathing as well. Mm-hmm. Beyond sometimes, when you're younger, you're on the floor. But I never quite get to that stage. I always hold back. And also with the muscles and the body, doing it at 80% is just fine. Tick over without really digging deep, because the deeper you dig, the longer you take to recover. And so ticking over and just keeping ticking over is the way. And so that thing of exercising 3 times a week and then having movement 3 times a week is I like that.
Yeah, actually. I swear, and a lot of people I work with, and people completely I can't think of what I'm looking for. Like, they misappreciate the importance of like walking. Like, I honestly can't state to people, like, if they wanted to get healthier and even like fitter, like, walk more. I mean, most people don't hit 10,000 steps. 10,000 steps is a bullshit made up number. Like, it was literally, it came out of nowhere. There's no science behind it whatsoever. It's just a nice round number, which someone said was like, made it sound official. But if you can walk 15, 16,000 steps a day, you will be amazed how much that input has to your health. Like, because walking is such a whole body exercise, which doesn't overly stress whatever else. But and which is why I kind of said, one of Pritchard, who was on last week's podcast from Dirty Sandwiches, he kind of, his little tip for everyone, which we're going to come on to yours in a second, was get a dog, because you have to walk. And I realize it's not exactly useful for everyone, but like, with my dogs, I have to walk. You have no choice. Sun shines, it rains, it snows, whatever else. Guess what? Dogs can.
It's a good discipline. Yeah, it's like having an event coming up. It's a discipline. You have no choice. And actually, walking. I mean, we're singing from the same hymn sheet here. Walking is the great unsung hero, along with running up and down steps. Walking is massively undervalued. You also process you mentally. It's good for you mentally. So in January 2020, so just before the first lockdown, very sadly, my wife died of cancer, breast cancer. We had 4 years notice. It was known that was going to happen, and eventually it did in January 20. So of course, during that period of time, I was obviously in a mess. My mantra was eat well, sleep well, and exercise, just to keep keep your head above water. And the walking, maybe 90 minutes a day, just going out and walking, processing. You're processing so much when you sleep, incidentally. If you need to process anything, sleep well. But you process a lot when you're walking, and that really helped keep my head above water in that very difficult period. So massive fan of walking. And walking, I really like to stride out.
Absolutely.
Sort of full hips and really.
I kind of feel like it's one of those things of, and you kind of mentioned, going up the stairs. Every time, I mean, I avoid London like the plague. I don't like big cities, but every time I go, if I'm going up and down, through the tubes, whatever else, I always take the stairs. And you look at the stairs and there's never anyone on the stairs. Everyone's on the escalators. And all of those people, and, and I've had people say, well, you don't live in London, you don't know what it's like, doing it every day, blah. But like, if you went up and down like the tube steps every day, just, twice a day, if you're going to work, you have to go up some stairs, you have to go down some stairs, you have to go on the way home, you go up and down some stairs. The change to your physical health, I'm not talking fitness, I mean, it would definitely benefit fitness on a huge number of people, especially from my breathing point of view, if you did it all nasal breathing, and if at times you try to go a little bit faster and still nasal breathe, etc., etc. Like, you could have untold benefits to your health through not having to pay to go to a gym, not having to find time outside of your busy schedule, because you're already doing it, but you're just choosing to go up the center aisle on the escalator instead. For me, it's
completely. I mean, I actually do that is the core of my training. I do it twice a week. I live on the river, actually, on a boat on the Twickenham side of Richmond, in southwest London, and so it is technically London, but it's kind of just one foot out.
Yeah,
very green all around. So I like to think that I'm not living in London. And there's a couple of bridges just along Richmond Lock specifically, and I go up and down there, and I do this twice a week. I do 40 flights.
Yeah.
So I do a bit of warm up first, so I get the old juices flowing through the joints and what have you.
Yeah.
15 minutes of that. And then the first 10 flights, very, very easy. Again, continued warming up, just one step at a time, nice and easy. And then I always do 40 flights, and there's any number of ways of breaking that down. You can do fast feet, you can do two steps at a time, nice and easy. You can do 2-step sprinting, you can do 3 steps at a time, you can do bouncing off just using your calf and your feet muscle. There's loads of different ways of breaking that down. You can do sets of 3, sets of 5, but and have a 30 seconds rest. So you can go for speed, endurance. There's loads of different ways of slicing that up, and I actually make that up as I go along in any one session, depending on where my body's at and what might be grumbling or not.
But even where your brain's, where your whole body's at, as where you're mentally at, and you're like, I'm not for speed today, actually,
yes.
And and being able to go, even if you, like, for me, and again, like for me, everything's about flexibility, and it's like being able to start something, and in your head you're going, it's going to be a speed or strength or whatever session, and then getting there and getting the first 2 reps in, you're like, this is bullshit, this is not working for me today, I'm going to switch up and do something else, because that there'll be another time where you're going to, it's going to be an endurance, but actually you get it and you're like, I'm on it today, I feel like good, I want to smash it.
And I think that's one of the other great principles of exercise, more for when you get older, because when you're younger, you're kind of bulletproof and you can turn up and do whatever.
Yeah.
But sometimes you'll turn up and your body will say, this is what's happening. It was a real discipline. When I started pole vaulting again at 45, I was so into it. Life was divided into time spent pole vaulting and time spent waiting to pole vault. And so I'd be thinking about it for 3 days solid. I'd pole vault twice a week. And I'd spend 3 days thinking about it, dreaming about it, thinking, this is what I'm going to do. And then I turn up, and my body wasn't quite letting me, because I'd have a niggle. I'd have a slightly sore knee, for example. And I learned a really hard lesson. Probably did that half a dozen times. I didn't listen to my body, and I got away with it a couple of times, but 3 or 4 times it cost me. And so that discipline to be super excited, and then to think, no, I've got to walk away. Now I can do that, and it's no problem at all. It's a discipline that I've learned over the years, but you have to go with what your body is giving you on that day.
Yes.
And sometimes certainly when I'm doing the steps, I'll kind of have a rough idea what I want to do, but that will change through the session. I think, I'll do this, or oh no, I'm going to try that. Oh no, I'm going to go back to that. Or I'm feeling really good, I'm going to do this. And through the entire session, the only constant is that you do 40 flights. And so step running, another great unsung hero of health and fitness.
I completely agree. Well, we have rattled up an hour, which seems like it took about 15 minutes, but
crikey, where did that go? I feel as though there's still so much to talk about.
Well, we'll just have you to come back on, and we'll do a whole another one. When you finally get your book written, we'll do another one then.
See you in about 20 years.
Yeah, exactly. So before we do finish off, as we mentioned beforehand, and as I always do, I like to round up with trying to offer people some advice, some tips, some little nugget that they can perhaps take away. You've just given like about 10 minutes worth of nuggets, really, but if people want to, like, you know, it's move, breathe, live. I want people to move better, breathe better, to live a happier, healthier life. So have you got anything that fits in with that they can take away and chuck in?
Well, not specifically on the move.
I mean, live is a big part too. So
yeah, I'm going to, when you mentioned it before we came on, I thought, okay, so on my grandmother's 100th birthday, I was sitting with her because we're having a big party, obviously, and I said, okay, nine is Welsh for grandmother.
Okay.
So I said, Nine, come on in. What's the secret to a long and healthy and happy life? Because she was the closest thing to an angel. I mean, she was just the most fantastic human being.
Yeah.
Serene and calm and so kind. And it was anyway. I won't bang on about my gran.
We can all do that.
But I said to her, right, Nine, what's the secret to a long, a healthy and happy life? And without pausing, she'd obviously thought about this. There was no time to think because she had it there. She said, eat prunes for breakfast. Don't get up too early. Don't worry about stuff too much. And a little bit of what you fancy does you good. So let's break that down. Eat prunes for breakfast. So that's gut health.
Yeah.
Roughage. We're talking about gut health. Gut health, super, super important. It's our second brain, and it's 70% of our health. Yeah. So keep your gut healthy. Don't get up too early. The importance of sleep in physical and mental repair cannot be overstated. No. So important. The importance of sleep. Read into it.
Yeah. If James Walker, Why We Sleep.
Yeah, gut health and sleep. Read into it. It's just profoundly important. Don't worry about stuff too much. So disposition, worriers. You don't want to be a worrier.
Yeah.
Because after all, what is life all about? Life is for living. I know we have challenges sometimes, but God, you know.
Yeah.
It's a gift. Every day is a gift. I've learned that. I've lost my mum and my wife in the last 2 years. Every day is a gift, and let's not mess it up by worrying about stuff. Appreciate what we have. Gratitude is a major, major positive emotion, to be grateful for what we do have. And what was the other one? A little bit of what you fancy does you good. Well, you know,
whatever it might be. Whatever it might be. And again, it all comes down to what so much of this conversation has been about. All of that is balance.
It's balance.
Do you know what I mean? And you know, whatever it is, you know, I kind of find it, I don't know, on Instagram and Facebook and social media and stuff in general, like everything's so extreme these days. Everything's like far left, far right, polarized. You know, it's either it's all kind of militant vegan or militant kind of carnivore, or it's this or that. And
you know, I think we can interpret everything with kindness, especially over the last couple of years when people have been under pressure. People have been, you know, we've all been through a difficult time in one way or another. I think interpreting everything with kindness and giving people the freedom to be themselves without fear, as long as they're not offensive or ruining somebody else's life, allow people to be themselves and the freedom to be who they are without jumping on them. And just a little bit of kindness and a little bit of wisdom, I think, would go a long, long way in the world. And I personally think that's coming. I think there's an awakening process going on. Well, I don't think, I know.
Yeah.
You can see it all around. And if you don't listen to Russell Brand on YouTube, then start doing that, because I think I've become to think he's an essential voice in the world. But
well, I think that's what you're, you know, kind of almost going full circle to where we very first started, but that's what you've set out to do with Bamboo. And, you know, from my perspective as someone who, you know, I'm an ambassador for Bamboo, so obviously, you know, but I I don't really take, I've kind of had offers from different bits and pieces to, oh, will you kind of push this night gear and whatever else, but like I don't stand behind anything that they really stand for. So, getting some clothes to wear on Instagram is all well and good or something, but actually for me it's like there's a message, and it's essentially, for want of a better word, kindness and a bit of like love, whether it be for ourselves and each other, or whether it be for the environment, the planet, and whatever else, which is really what the biggest BAM message is. The environmental side is actually such a huge part of it, and it all comes back into that, let's live with a little bit more love, I guess.
Yeah, I guess love and kindness is what else is there apart from those?
Apart from pole vaulting.
Oh, and pole vaulting. Love, kindness, pole vaulting, and kite surfing.
Exactly. Amazing.
Yeah,
well, on that
brilliant.
note, we'll leave it with love,
gravestone.
kindness, pole vaulting, and kite surfing.
Brilliant.
Thank you so much,
Brilliant.
Dave. It's
really
been an absolute
nice
pleasure
chatting
to have
with you.
you chat.
Yeah, they're really good. Thank you.
Amazing. Cheers, mate.